Hello and welcome to Penguin Classics On Air. This is Elda Rotor, editorial director of Penguin Classics. The year is 1910. Anna Karenina and War and Peace have made Leo Tolstoy the world's most famous author. But fame comes at a price. In this fascinating look at a tortured genius on the eve of death, Jay Parini presents Tolstoy's autobiographical writing alongside letters from loved ones to paint a portrait of the great author's final year. Desperate to find respite from his troubled marriage, Tolstoy ventures into the wilderness in search of isolation, only to find a battle for his soul and legacy that offers no peace. Last Steps, the late writings of Leo Tolstoy, is published to coincide with a motion picture adaptation of Jay Parini's novel, The Last Station, a novel of Tolstoy's final year, featuring Christopher Plummer and Helen Mirren. Today's guest is Jay Parini, the editor and introducer of the Penguin Classics edition of Last Steps, and the author of the novel The Last Station, a novel of Tolstoy's final year. Jay is Axon Professor of English at Middlebury College. He is a poet, biographer, editor, critic, and the author of 6 novels, including Benjamin's Crossing and The Apprentice Lover. His essays and reviews appear regularly in the TLS, the New York Times Book Review, the Chronicle of Higher Education, Harper's, and elsewhere. Thanks so much for doing this.
Oh, it's great. I'm glad to do it.
Okay, let's start with your novel, The Last Station, a novel of Tolstoy's final year. What's it about, and what compelled you to write about Tolstoy's last days?
Well, this is a novel about the last year in the life of Leo Tolstoy. I was always a great fan of Tolstoy's writing. From teenage years, I read Tolstoy, and in the mid-'80s, I was reading 2 or 3 biographies of Tolstoy and became absolutely compelled by the life story. And then when I was living in Italy in 1985 or 6, I was up in Naples, and I came across the diaries of a young 20-some-year-old Moscow University student, Valentin Bulgakov, who went to be Tolstoy's secretary in his last year. And he wrote an amazing account, really, in the form of keeping his diaries, but then he published these diaries and telling what happened and how all of the major events in Tolstoy's life came to a kind of crisis in the final year. He was torn between his status as a wealthy aristocrat and his wish to identify with the peasants. He was torn between his interest in sort of vegetarianism and chastity and his own kind of aristocratic lifestyle and his fathering of 13 children and his habits with women, which had led him over the years to affairs with countless serfs and so forth, and young women and whores and prostitutes and so forth. So he felt all these conflicts. And Valentin Bulgakov mentioned that Sophia Tolstoy kept a diary, Leo kept one himself, that Tolstoy's doctor, Dr. Makovitsky, was keeping a diary, that Tolstoy's daughter Sasha was keeping a diary, and so forth and so on. So I went to the Tolstoy Society in London, in fact, and was able to get copies of all of the diaries of all these different people, which had been translated into English. And I read through all of them and realized I had a found novel here, that I could make a novel of many voices, layering the various points of view in a kind of cubist fashion, and retell this astounding story of Tolstoy's final year, culminating in his flight from home in October of 1910 and his death a few weeks later at a rural railway station in Ostapovo in Russia. That was The Last Station. I worked on that for some years, researched it for about 5 years, and then published it in 1990. It was published in 1990 to, quite wide acclaim, in fact, front page New York Times Book Review, and so forth. And that's essentially the story of The Last Station, which has now been published it's been published in over 31 countries in something like 26 languages.
That's wonderful.
So it's been quite widely read throughout the world.
And the story is fascinating and great movie potential. So we're excited now to learn that your novel's been adapted for a movie to come out in this fall of 2009, and apparently it stars Christopher Plummer as Leo Tolstoy, Helen Mirren as Sophia, Paul Giamatti as Vladimir Chertkov, and James McAvoy as the student, Bulgakov. Can you tell us about the experience of seeing your novel about Tolstoy reenacted for the screen? I know from a Chronicle article that you actually were on the set as well.
Yes, and in fact I wrote the original version of the screenplay with the old actor Anthony Quinn. who played in Zorba the Greek and so forth, Academy Award-winning, old-style Hollywood actor. He had bought the rights to the novel soon after it came out, and he and I worked for years on the screenplay, and then he was going to play Tolstoy. But he died, unfortunately, and that was rather sad and sort of scuppered my film. So we started from scratch again. I worked with Bonnie Arnold. She had produced Dances with Wolves and many other films. And Bonnie and I managed to pull it together and get Christopher Plummer and Helen Mirren involved, and the director, Mike Hoffman, who then, fortunately, he did a fresh version of the script himself, which brought it closer to the novel. And I worked very closely with Mike on the script and the whole process of production. I was on the set during the filming, and I've been involved at every stage very closely with the producers and with Mike Hoffman. We talk on the phone nearly every day still. I saw the final version of the film 3 weeks ago in London, and I was absolutely blown away. It was extremely thrilling to see your novel so faithfully rendered, brought to life by these fabulous actors, and filmed in a first-rate way.